Hey everyone, welcome to The Week in Doubt, a podcast for atheists, agnostics, and whoever. Today's episode is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download at www.audibletrial.com/The Week in Doubt. 100,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. It's been a while since I've referenced Bill Maher on the show, but he's had some pretty interesting guests on the last couple of episodes. Last week he had Sam Harris on, and I was pretty excited about that, but unfortunately they didn't discuss religion at all. They ended up talking about gun control the whole time Sam was on. Then last night Bill had Lawrence Krauss on. And if you're a regular listener to the show, then you've probably heard me mention his name before. Lawrence Krauss is a renowned theoretical physicist and cosmologist. He's the author of the book A Universe from Nothing. Near the end of the show, Bill brought another guest out, and to my surprise, they actually got into the topic of Eben Alexander. And once again, if you're a regular listener to the show, you've probably heard me discuss Eben Alexander a time or two. He's the Harvard neurosurgeon who had a near-death experience and authored the book, I believe it's entitled Proof of Heaven. And probably a month or so back, it was a relatively big news story. I won't really bother rehashing my opinions of Dr. Eben Alexander and his near-death experience. If you're a listener, then you've heard it all before. And if you're new to the show, then it basically boils down to that I don't believe the doctor was lying about his near-death experience, but at the same time, I don't think we can take his anecdotal story as definitive proof of an afterlife. I should mention, though, that at least on YouTube, the first episode in which I covered the story of Eben Alexander received more hits than any other episode I've ever put online. And it was actually the only episode that I really ever caught flack for, too. For the most part, people online have been great to me. It's mostly all positive comments and reviews. If there's any criticism, it's usually posed in a constructive and positive way. But something about the story of Eben Alexander, though, definitely hit a nerve. And I did receive a significant amount of negative feedback from believers on YouTube in response to that episode. And I actually, if you go back through the archives, I did an episode in response to the negative feedback, and I kind of offered my rational, at least I thought they were rational, counter arguments to each criticism. But anyway, I was so pleased. There was something cathartic about seeing Bill Maher and Lawrence Krauss kind of back me up, hearing their opinions on the matter. And I will play that for you. I'll play that excerpt from last night's Real Time with Bill Maher. Hopefully I won't get in trouble for doing so. But the show's about an hour long, and I think I extracted about maybe in between 4 and 6 minutes of material, and I'll play a little bit at a time. There was a couple of kind of funny little exchanges I wanted to play from the show before I get into that kind of heavy back and forth regarding Eben Alexander. I wanted to play this first little clip because it reminded me of a book Christopher Hitchens always used to talk about. Christopher Hitchens used to talk about a book entitled When It Was Dark. I think that was the name of it. And the author might have been Guy Thorne, I think. And it was this book about these bones being found in the Holy Land. And it turned out they were the bones of Jesus. And so the whole world, or people thought they were the bones of Jesus. And so the whole world became convinced that Christianity was a lie, there never was a resurrection. And it was kind of a Christian morality tale because it paints this picture of that when people thought that the resurrection wasn't true and that Christianity was a lie, they reverted back to savagery and brutality and lasciviousness. And basically, humanity just erupts into one big, unrestrained, degenerate orgy or something like that, you know. And then, according to the plot, it turns out at the end that the twist is the resurrection was true, and the story about the bones of Christ being found was really just part of some elaborate conspiracy. I believe, as Christopher Hitchens used to tell it, according to the story, the Jews were painted as the bad guys, surprise, surprise, who concocted this kind of elaborate hoax in order to lure people away from Christianity. And like I said, I think it was meant to be some kind of warped Christian morality tale. And the lesson was supposed to be that without the quote-unquote truth of the resurrection, we'd be little more than animals or savages. But Bill Maher covers the recent news story about the discovery of the bones of King Richard III. And I don't know if he was aware of when it was dark or if he came up with this analogy all on his own. But he poses a hypothetical that sounds very much like the plot of When It Was Dark.
But they found the body of Richard III in a parking lot, which is amazing. You know, I didn't realize this, he was only king for 2 years. He was literally a speed bump in history. But it got me thinking that if they were in Jerusalem and dug up a grave and found somebody who was unmistakably Jesus, the crown was still on his head, he had JC monogrammed on the shroud, holes in the hands, would it change anyone's mind who's a Christian? And I think probably not, because I think belief in the human mind is stronger than evidence, which brings me to supply-side economics.
So that was pretty funny. Then next up, they're basically talking about human gullibility, and Bill mentions a poll that talks about the number of people that thought God was involved in the outcome of the Super Bowl.
The same exactly.
But, you know, this is a country where 27% of people said they thought God played a role in the outcome of the Super Bowl.
Winning or losing?
Yes.
Where did that come from?
That was a poll. That was...
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
It must be true. I tweeted
More people believe in angels. More people believe in angels than believe in evolution. I mean, it's just, and you know, it's really a shame when nonsense can substitute for fact with impunity. And the trouble is when I think we just don't make enough fun of it. We should ridicule these people.
Well.
I mean, you should do comedy about it.
I should. Yeah. I should do comedy. That is so true, Doc. Great idea.
You did a film about it once.
Ray Lewis, you know, we love Ray Lewis.
Oh, absolutely.
Great player. Of course. I wrote this quote down. He said before the game they were asking about the time he stabbed a guy. And he said, God doesn't make mistakes. That's just who he is. It's just who he is. That's just...
In case you're not familiar with the sound of Lawrence Krauss's voice, he was the one talking about more people believing in angels than evolution. And the gentleman with the English accent was Martin Bashir. He's a well-known journalist. He hosts a show on MSNBC, and years ago he famously did this groundbreaking interview with Michael Jackson. But here Bill brings out Newsweek editor, I think she's a Newsweek editor, Tina Brown. And this is when everyone really starts getting into the Eben Alexander story.
So here, let me show you the copy of the last actual Newsweek that was out. This called, and the cover was, this is the last one, right?
No, it isn't the last one.
Close to the last one.
It would have been the last one if you'd had your way.
I know. I really objected to this.
Offensive
I thought,
Twitter
I know, we had a Twitter fight. I wrote, Newsweek has Heaven is Real on the cover. If this is what it takes to stay in business, just stop. Better dead than sad. Yeah. And you wrote back, tweeted back, fortunately for you, Bill Maher, hell is real too.
Yeah.
But I have to say...
And by the way, just for you, today we posted a piece on the Daily Beast about afterlife as hell, because not many people seem to go to hell when they have these afterlife experiences, but some do.
Well, I'm going to get you in on this in a second, but just to catch people what on this. This is a doctor. He was a neurosurgeon.
Correct.
Not a neuroscientist. Okay, big difference. He had a meningitis-induced coma. So he was out, and he said while he was out, he had a near-death experience. Let me read some of what he said happened in his book, Heaven is Real, that you printed here. He said, "I was a speck on a beautiful butterfly wing. Millions of other butterflies around us. We were flying through blooming flowers. Newspaper taxis appeared on the shore." Oh,
You are a
Rocking horse people were eating
man.
marshmallow pies. The girl had kaleidoscope eyes. Okay, I was mixing those two. But the first part is what he said, and this is where this bothers me so much. Because Doc, please help me out.
Well, look, I mean, it is ridiculous. The point is that, so you're deprived of oxygen, and what are you going to do? I mean, you may have had similar experiences in other cases where your metabolism has been changed.
He does. Most Friday nights.
And the point is why, the problem with making, the problem with journalism and science like that is that you're trying to make two sides to every story, but the thing about science is, most often, one side is wrong.
Right.
But he, and now look, he was a man. The author of this piece is the neurosurgeon. He was a man of hard science. And the whole point of this piece is, the whole point of the piece is that in all those CAT scans, his brain was completely dead.
No.
And he makes the point.
That's not possible.
Well, this is,
okay.
I'm just telling you.
That's the point.
The easiest, Richard Feynman was a famous scientist, said the easiest person to fool is yourself. When something happens to you, you suddenly feel like it's significant. He used to go around to everyone and saying, "You won't believe what happened to me today. You won't believe what happened to me." And people would say, "What?" And he'd say, "Absolutely nothing." Because, I mean, when, you can dream a million stupid dreams, and then one day you dream your sister's arm is going to break and her leg breaks, and you think, aha, I'm clairvoyant.
I think actually, in fairness to him, the piece is really about expanded consciousness. It's really about...
I know, but it's based on bullshit because he's saying... What he said was that his cerebral cortex shut down. It was completely offline. And every neuroscientist says that's brain death, which is a 100% lethal condition.
Yeah, you don't come back.
What probably happened is that he was put on a surgical anesthetic, DMT, they call it. Ketamine is one. I think I did that in college. And he had a dynamite dream, which you have when you're coming back online and you're on a surgical
And some of them are good dreams, or some are bad dreams. Your good dreams heaven, the bad dreams are hell. I mean,
the point is that it was a very profound, life-changing experience for him, and
I'm sure it was.
But
it's a pretty gripping read. I mean, it's the only time that I have ever felt sort of moved by a piece, actually,
but I'm
in
sure
this area.
such
It wasn't a woo-woo piece.
as real to him as anything. I'm not denying that to him it felt real. Hallucinations are real to people who hallucinate. No, they really are.
Well, Bill will know about that.
We're trying to move away from being the anti-science country. This is the
What way?
Well,
80% of people in America or north of that have religious beliefs, and almost that many are Christians. So I think, I don't think it's properly described as journalism, this piece. This guy is reporting that he had a subjective experience, but I don't think we're, as a country, trying to get away from religion. Most people believe that heaven
it's
is real.
decreasing, though, happily, actually. No matter what people say, it's actually the number of people who claim at least affiliation with any organization is happily
especially
decreasing.
the young people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, access to
Especially
information.
these people.
But he's not necessarily describing a religious experience. He describes a spiritual experience, and it is powerful and it is moving, and I think we cannot deny that people feel and experience these things. And
the experiences feel real. Lots of people have spiritual experiences, and that's... We should celebrate that. I have one when I look at the Hubble Space Telescope images and see galaxies that are 10 billion light years away with civilizations that are long gone. I mean, to me, people say science isn't spiritual, but to me it's more spiritual because it's actually real.
Well, I feel that way about it.
Well, I thought Lawrence Krauss had some excellent insights there. And I like how he touched on, for him, gazing through a telescope is a quote-unquote spiritual experience. And how he added the little jab at the end. And what makes it even better is that it's science, so it's real. And it kind of echoes what I talk about a lot on the show, how religious people shouldn't be said to have a monopoly on quote-unquote spiritual experiences. And I put spiritual in quotes because I use that word myself for anything that refers to a transporting experience, an experience where you maybe feel moved or inspired or undergo some kind of change or alteration of consciousness. I think all of us have moments like that, what people might call transcendent, what Christopher Hitchens like to call the numinous. And I've heard at least one Christian apologist say, actually no, two, in regard to how sometimes an atheist will say atheists can have transcendent experiences too, and you don't have to be a religious person to have a transcendent experience. And they'll think it's a got you moment, and the Christian apologist will say, well, transcends what? They think you can only have a transcendent experience if you're literally transcending from the mundane into the divine. When to me, although it might feel like a divine experience, you can transcend your normal state of consciousness. You could say a runner's high is a transcendent experience. A drug-induced epiphany, whether it's psilocybin or ketamine or whatever it is, and I'm not saying to go out and try those, I'm just saying that those could be considered a transcendent experience. Feeling moved by Beethoven could be a transcendent experience. So I think you could rightly describe an experience as transcendent if it refers to transcending a normal mode of consciousness and not necessarily transcending literally into some divine realm or state. And there was another news story that I want to cover. If you're a regular listener or just a well-informed non-believer or believer for that matter, then you'll probably be familiar with the Westboro Baptist Church. They're that church that pickets the funerals of soldiers and holds up these horrible signs that say things like, "Thank God for dead soldiers," "God hates fags," just really toxic stuff. And they're kind of religious trolls in a way, not necessarily cyber trolls, but in real life, they're constantly trolling for attention. They try to get attention through obnoxious and extremely negative behavior. And I covered at least one other news story on the show about a family member who broke away from this religious group or cult, whatever. I have no qualms calling it a cult because of the toxic nature of the organization. And here's another story about a family member leaving. And this is from the Huffington Post. Libby Phelps Alvarez, former Westboro Baptist Church member. We prayed for people to die. In March 2009, Libby Phelps Alvarez left the Westboro Baptist Church saying goodbye to a life of picketing the funerals of dead soldiers and holding up controversial anti-gay signs. Nearly 4 years later, the granddaughter of Fred Phelps Sr., founder and pastor of the Westboro Baptist Church, gave an emotional interview to NBC's Today Show in which she described the controlling life of hatred and intolerance that she's left behind. They think that they are the only ones who are going to heaven, and if you don't go to that church, you're going to hell, Alvarez told Today, explaining that the congregation was driven primarily by its homophobic views. Phelps Alvarez says she recalls a particular moment when she began to feel she could no longer support the group's efforts. There was a point when we started praying for people to die, Phelps Alvarez said. I didn't actually do that, but I was around when they did it. So as heinous as that is, it doesn't really surprise me. Thankfully, it sounds like this woman actually had a conscience and was able to get away from the hold the group had on her. As I said half jokingly on the show before, I think a day will come when we will no longer have to worry about the Westboro Baptist Church, because I think most of the congregants are blood relatives of Fred Phelps Sr., or at least a good number of them. And I think most people with a lick of sense steer clear of them. So I imagine as the generations continue to get older, eventually the Westboro Baptist Church will probably just fade away, or at least that's my hope. I think there is something comforting about knowing that at least some member of that family actually has a heart and a conscience. And like I said, there was a story about another family member. I think it was Fred Phelps' son who ended up leaving because he also just couldn't abide the perpetual hate and intolerance. But I think that will do it for this week. So as always, this has been The Week in Doubt. Thank you for listening. You can go to Facebook and look for The Week in Doubt and like us there. You can subscribe or leave a review through iTunes. You can subscribe or leave a review through Podbean and also listen to some of the old episodes there. And as always, any support is greatly appreciated. Thank you.